Test 1 2 3 4. Good morning. Yes, I I appreciate you getting right into it, Shawnee. Uh, yes, there's a reason why I put that question on there because that's why I wanted to start with. Yes. Welcome everybody. We're a little bit early. I am trying a couple of new things. Every week I try a little bit a few more skills, right? So I use OBS. Not sure if you're familiar with it, but that's what I'm using. Looks like this froze, so I always love it when we get past the tech part. Mad Chicken Acres. I love that story. Hey, Mad Chicken Story. I have a question for you. I'm, I apologize. It's Mad Chick Acres. Do you have chickens? That's immediately where my brain went. That's what I was curious. Food Forest Permaculture. Welcome. Morning. Good morning, everybody from Minnesota. So I put a question as a prompt. Huron County, Midwestern Ontario. Welcome. Our northern neighbors. Mad Chick Acre says no chickens, just property. Okay, I had to ask. So we've had chickens in the past. We don't currently have chickens. I'm gonna keep this story short. Today's gonna be a lot of storytelling, but I'm gonna keep this story short. So we have had chickens in the past, and it was a wonderful experience. But you're waiting for the but. There's always a but. The but is that I quickly realized after we first got chickens that as much as we enjoy having chickens, there's a whole other world out here that wants to have chickens. And by that, I mean raccoons, eagles. My daughter actually filmed an eagle swoop down on our driveway behind me and actually fly off with one of our hens, which is insane. I couldn't believe it when I saw it, but yeah. So keeping chickens is difficult if you want them to free range, which I love to, but it's difficult. So we have a pretty good sized run on the chicken coop, and I hate having the chickens cooped up in there. And the chicken coop is so large that I can't move it without a tractor. So I think the next flock of chickens that we get, I'm probably going to go with some type of lighter structure that can move, like a chicken tractor that you've seen. It's just I don't have the time to devote to that because of my plant nursery business, so I have to focus on the business part. And then I think at some point I'm probably gonna get chickens again. Maybe not this year, but possibly in the next. I would say probably this time next year I'll try again with another flock of chickens. What ended up happening with the last of the chickens, the hens, and my rooster in particular is we had a dog. So we had two dogs. We still have one, but we had a female dog who decided she liked to chase after chickens, and she ended up using my rooster as a squeaky toy, which that was sad. Actually, that one broke my heart because she didn't kill my rooster. I had to put him down because she ended up. I have a feeling she was using him as a squeaker toy until he didn't squeak anymore. So that's what happened to my rooster, and then she ended up going after a couple of hens too. So it's hard enough when you're trying to defend against all the predators on the outside of the property, but when the threat is from inside the property, that it gets really difficult. So if if any of you have had experience with chickens, I would love to hear about those stories. And that's all I'm gonna say about my chickens. Otherwise, I'll be sad for the rest of the day. But it's okay. I like I like to think about the happy moments with the chickens, and I think the best part was just be able to go out every morning and collect eggs. That I mean that's what you imagine when you get chickens at the outset. Is just be able to get your fresh eggs in the morning. So that's one of the coolest things, and then they become your pets too. So anyway, the to, today's subject. Happy Saturday, happy May. So we're in spring gardening season now, and you could tell behind me the leaves are starting to bloom, which is awesome because 2 weeks ago when I was doing the last that live stream, these trees behind me were just sticks. So it's fantastic to look to see. And today's a beautiful day, no clouds in the sky, bright blue skies with sun. And I think here in Minnesota, we're supposed to get up to about 70 degrees today. So that's exciting. Last night we had a frost warning, and that's what I want to start off with this live stream is a story time. So this is about 8, 9 years ago, about this time of the year when I started to harden off my plants. So it's actually a couple weeks after today. So today's the first week of May. I'm gonna say like maybe a week from now, starting to harden off tomato plants, and I think I had some pepper plants there too. So I checked my weather app, which is also I'm curious to know if you guys use weather apps or if you use local weather on the news or whatnot to judge this. But the local weather app said that our lows they didn't even have a frost warning. It was supposed to be a low of 40 or 39 degrees, something like that. I'm like, okay, I'm fine. So I had the seedlings outside overnight because they had already been outside for a few days, and I remember coming downstairs in the kitchen making coffee, grabbing a cup of coffee, and then walking to the sliding door, pulling back the curtains, and my heart dropped because everything had this beautiful frosty sheen to it. The tomato plants and the pepper plants, they look cool because they had frost on them, but they were toast. They were toast. So I learned a very hard lesson that day. I learned a very hard lesson that day, and that was never trust the weather app blindly. And my rule of thumb at this point is if we have a forecast of overnight lows that dip below 40 or at 40, that's where I draw the line. So I'm gonna take appropriate actions to make sure that I don't have another disaster. So the last 3 nights here in Minnesota, we've had a frost warning. I don't have any tomatoes or peppers outside right now. I won't start hardening those off until about 2 weeks from now. And the reason why is because since I have a commercial nursery, I'm trying to really dial in at what point do I absolutely need to. I'm trying to dial in the schedule and the calendar to where I can start them later and then get them in production when I need them. So sort of like a just in time with manufacturing processes. That's what I'm trying to do with my plant nursery. Because otherwise, I'm taking up space inside the shop under lights. And if I don't need to take up that space until I absolutely need it, that's what I'm trying to get to. So it's just more efficiency for me. So I gotta read some of these comments in the chat here because this is what I'm curious to know about apps. So let's see. Ecology of the day, my hardest lesson growing plants, that taking on gardening in a serious way is both simple and complex. Yes, I agree with that. It's gonna be warm today, yup. Shawnee Grow, I use a weather app. Yep, I use a couple of weather apps. Here, let me bump up this volume a little bit more. There you go. Let me know if that works. I just bumped up my volume a little bit. Okay. Strawberry farm here covered all the plants. I think that they had blossoms. My strawberry patch doesn't have blossoms yet. So that's great to touch on that point. So I have strawberry plants outside that are blossoming, that are flowering. You have to keep in mind though that I don't have strawberries in the ground, they're in containers, which is why I grow in containers. It's part of my business, right? But because I'm in grow bags specifically, the soil warms up faster than it otherwise would if it was in a raised bed or in the ground. So going back to what I had previously mentioned, I'm trying to get more efficient on the timing so I don't have as long of lag between when I have to start a plant and when I need to deliver it to a customer or when I need to transplant it out to the grow bag. Sounds like the sound is better. Thank you, JBot. So I do have flowers on those plants, but with those plants, they're off screen over here. I have frost blankets on them, so if we do get frost, it's not the end of the world for the strawberry plants, just because they're protected. I did do some hand pollinating with the strawberry plants this week because the bees, I haven't seen any bees or pollinators out yet. So we're still kind of early, but I think with the warming up here, we're gonna start to see our pollinator friends come out. And I have a whole yard of dandelions behind me. And I've mentioned this before, but I like to let my dandelions go to seed, which probably infuriates suburban and urban homeowners. But the best part about those dandelions behind me and the wild Minnesota violas is that they're a great food source for my pollinator friends. So once the pollinators, the bumblebees, and we have some honeybees around here too. I have a couple neighbors that keep honeybees. They'll show up, and then I have a welcoming party with my dandelions over my shoulder. I keep pointing over there because that's one of the grass fields with the dandelions. So they'll show up, and then I can uncover my strawberries, and then they can go do their thing. And then we just start off the season. So it's kind of a cool relationship with how this start to the growing season works here at our location, our acreage. The only plants that I was concerned about if we did have a frost are we have two apple trees, and it sounds like some of you have apple trees too. And I'm not overly concerned with the apple trees. It's not going to kill the trees. And honestly, our apple trees are 40 years old. So they've been around a while. This isn't the first time they've had a late frost. It won't be the last time. And I always like to laugh at these oak trees over my shoulder. Well, not laugh, but it's more of a reverence for the oak trees over my shoulder. And the reason is they've been around much longer than I have. And the maple trees over here, they usually start to come alive or come out of dormancy before the oak trees. And I just looked at that as the oak trees have been around much longer than these maple trees. The oak trees have seen some Minnesota weather, and that's just wisdom with its age. So that's something I always love to see is how the older trees that have been around and survived the brutal Minnesota winters and, well, really spring, summer, and fall seasons too, because they're all crazy. It seems like they're crazy this time, in recent history anyway. But they're still here and they're still thriving. So that it's always cool to see how these trees that have outlived us or have been around longer than us have continued to thrive and prosper in our changing climate. Okay. See, Ecology Today says I check the weather compulsively 5 to 20 times daily, sometimes multiple sources. I used to be like that. Don't get me wrong. I still check it frequently, especially this time of year. But I have systems in place to where I don't have to constantly check to see what's going on with the weather. This time of the year, definitely, I'm checking to see for frost warnings, and most of the weather apps. My wife uses Weather Underground. I use AccuWeather, and they both do a decent job. I'm more concerned about frost at night and making taking the appropriate steps to make sure the plants do fine for that. When we get into the warmer season, I'm looking at the highs or I'm looking at the extremes. So if we have high humidity or low humidity, when we get to that time of the year, I'll talk about ways that I can prevent issues. I'll say it like that from occurring. But that's the stuff that I'm looking at is I'm looking at the extremes. Like if we're gonna have a frost warning, how cold is it gonna get? And I could say from some of the plants that we do have in ground, parsley is one of them that I grew last year and I just let it go. I have that in a bed right next to the house. That's our kitchen herb garden, and parsley will go. It'll keep growing fine down to about low 20s is what I found. When it gets to the teens, it's gonna struggle. But what I did is I just threw frost blankets over it, and I was growing that well into late fall last year. So anyway, that's story time for the cool season weather. If you do have cool season plants out, they could take frost and they could take freezes. So that's the best part about our vegetable plants this time of year is they're adapted to it. See, ecology of the day. I checked the 6 nursery trees for a neighbor who is away. They're glorious and blooms. Oh yeah, yeah. Our apple trees, both of the apple trees, they have uh, they have flowers on them. So here in the next week or so, once the bumblebees and the honeybees and the other pollinators show up, that's one of my favorite times of the year. Is the those apple trees sound like they're living. Well, they are living, of course, but it's just that buzz from the pollinators is just so cool. And I'll go out there and take videos. I'll probably put a short post up once that happens. It should be here in the next week or so. See, Wickershire Project asks what zone we're in. So I'm in zone 4B. I know there's a difference between the US hardiness zones and the Canadian zones, but we're in the US hardiness zone 4Bs. So that means we can get winter lows to minus 20 to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's our USDA zone. And last week, or maybe it was the week before, I was talking about the perennial plants that I have coming out of dormancy, and those ones, the rhubarb and the raspberries, are two of my hardiest plants that I love because no matter how bad the winter gets, or maybe some self-inflicted damage from me, because I made some mistakes, those plants still come back in the spring and they do just fine. See, I'm in Canada 6A, 6B, slightly different than USA. Yep. Wickershire Project says we have apple trees. That's good. Sourcing future plum peach, more apples, fig, and mulberries. I love everything about that. Raspberries and rhubarb are tough. Yes, amen to that. And I'm glad they are tough because if they weren't tough, it would be even harder to grow in Minnesota. So I'm glad we do have some very hardy plants that, regardless of what happens, we're doing we're doing okay. Andy, you have haskaps growing? Yes, I do. I don't have them here for the plant show today. I showed them here a few, or I think 2 weekends ago, when I was doing the perennial wake up plant show. So I have a couple of them are flowering, and I think here in a couple of weeks, once they start setting fruit, I'll share that again on one of these live streams. But for the last week, for what was going on here at the nursery, I I'll show you here. I got a plant here to show you later in the live show. But last week was about getting the sugar snap peas set up. So I showed on screen the type of cage I use for the sugar snap peas, and it's an old spool of fencing that I had that had maybe 3 by 3 inch squares. It works really well for the grow bags. So what I did is I went through the hoop house and I just got the fencing hooked up on the grow bags, which it's really just bending it, making it as the arch, and then setting it down into the grow bag. And then as the plants grow, the tendrils come out and latch onto the fence, and then they continue to grow up. And as I mentioned last week, I do sugar snap pea varieties that don't get very big. So a couple of my favorites are Sugar Ann. I have Royal Snap and Honey Snap. The Royal Snap and Honey Snap come from Johnny Selected Seed. And the cool part about those varieties is that they bring the color. So if you have kids, the colored sugar snap peas look very cool, and are the sugar snap peas anyway are a favorite with children. But just adding the colors to those pea pods is just like a next level of wow factor. So those are three varieties that I grow every year: Honey Snap, Royal Snap, and then the Sugar Ann. And so I got the fencing set up in the grow bags. And then also last week I got my warm season, some of the warm season plants seeded. So cucumbers are running. Those are now under lights. They're about this tall, so all the cotyledon leaves, the seed leaves are out. They're starting to photosynthesize. They're doing their thing. I won't have true leaves here for another week or so. And then once the cucumbers come on, I'll probably show you those too. But besides the cucumbers, I also got my warm season herbs started. So I think I seeded 5 varieties of basil. Some of those, actually, I don't think I showed the seed varieties for the basil, so I'll just run those down. I do Italian large leaf. That's one of my favorite ones. It's a favorite of my customers. I also do lemon basil. That's my absolute favorite basil, just because to me it smells like lemon pledge. So if you ever used lemon pledge in your childhood like I did, and more importantly, I guess I used lemon pledge when I was in the military. So for my dress uniform, for my dress shoes, I'd actually use lemon pledge for the last little shine before we'd go out on inspection or parade or whatever we're doing. So lemon basil smells to me like lemon pledge. Lime basil, so you can't grow lemon basil without lime basil. I have Thai basil, that's another favorite of my customers. And then cinnamon basil, which is another one that it has a cool flavor, it looks cool. So those are the basil varieties that I have going. Some of the other summer herbs I have summer savory, which has a very cool flavor. I I didn't. That was one of those plants that I didn't set out originally to grow, but I had customer requests, and I had enough requests to where I said, okay, yeah, I can add it in the lineup. And just as a reminder, with your summer herbs or your summer plants, I mentioned this last week, but I'm probably going to keep on mentioning this as we're at this stage of the growing season, is that you have minimum threshold temperatures for different types, classifications of plants. So when we're talking about the warm season plants, so warm season herbs, especially basil, 50 degrees is your threshold. So with this part of the world in Minnesota, what that looks like is I just started the seeds this last week, but they're not going to go outside until June, possibly the end of May, but it's probably going to be June because when the first week of June rolls around, that's when we traditionally have overnight lows that are above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's important because basil, especially if it gets too cool, you'll start to see discoloration. It gets really upset. And even though those plants aren't using our language to communicate to us, just by looking at the leaf of a basil that's been damaged or upset because it's in too cool temperatures, it'll tell you when it's upset or unhappy. So that's probably one of my other, just as a side note, one of my favorite parts of growing at this level is just our plants are actually talking to us. So it takes practice and repetition, but once you get those skill sets down, you can look at a plant and know if it's happy or not just by the way it's growing, what it's trying to tell you, leaf discoloration, maybe how it's stretching, if it needs more light, or maybe if it's bending over because it has too much light. It's very, that's one of my favorite parts of growing is the nonverbal cues or just that type of communication. I guess I'm struggling to describe this because it's a little it's unusual, but they're our plants are communicating with us. I'll just leave it at that. Okay. JBot says when I bought this tiny home, it was full of ornamental plants, shrubs, and trees. I have fit on some food and am considering removing ornamental to fit more food. Yeah. One cool part about that, the ornamentals, is sometimes I'll get requests for straight up ornamental plants, and I typically decline that because I don't grow any strictly ornamental plants here. It's all edible. That makes edible landscapes. You would think the name would be obvious, but I've had customers or I've had I had people call me asking me if I do turf grass, and I'm like, no, I don't do turf grass. So I'll always recommend that type of work to somebody who actually specializes in ornamental plants or turf grass. But that's all to say that I do grow ornamental edibles. So that is the actual thing. And so what I mean by that is a couple examples. One example and one of my favorite peppers to grow, and I'm not growing it this year, but I have grown it multiple seasons in the past, is a purple cayenne pepper. So if you've never seen or heard of a purple cayenne pepper, just Google purple cayenne pepper and you'll see it. It's one of the coolest pepper plants I've grown just because the flowers on that, they have white and purple petals, which right there is cool when it starts to flower. The fruit of a purple cayenne pepper is actually purple. So most peppers, regardless of what their finished color is going to be, they start off with green. That's traditionally. There's plenty of exceptions, but traditionally or most pepper varieties start off green, and then as they mature and ripen, they'll change to their final color. So that's where you get the reds, oranges, yellows, whatnot. But the purple cayenne pepper that starts off as a purple fruit, and then as it matures and ripens, it'll finish to red like you typically see with a cayenne pepper. So the first time I grew that, I was in awe of it just because the colors that I was seeing and how that plant was growing. So I told you about the flowering and the fruiting stage, but if we take a couple steps back and go with the vegetative stage of that purple cayenne pepper, the leaves and the stems actually have purple streaks in them. So if you haven't grown a lot of peppers before, that's one that I would recommend if you like cayenne anyway, just for the spice part of that plant. But it's so cool because you see that variegation on that plant. Um, it's just a very cool experience. Another new pepper that I did last year for ornamental edibles was called Hallows Eve, and I'm not sure if they came up with this name because of Halloween, but when I first saw the picture in the seed catalog, I thought instantly of Halloween. So I have a feeling that's probably where this is coming from. So that's a super hot pepper, but that one will be black and orange when it finishes, and it's a very very cool plant. So Hallows Eve and then the purple cayenne pepper are both ornamental edibles. There's and that's just a pepper plant. So there's other types of plants too that are considered ornamental edibles, and I could spend another couple hours just talking about those with you guys. I'm curious to know if you guys have any ornamental edibles that you're growing right now. So Shani, I gotta back up. There's a lot of chats in there. That's fantastic. So Wickershire Project says basils. Cracks knuckles. I love that. Sweet Genovese, mammoth. Yep. Lime lemon. Fantastic. Cinnamon and holy basil. Fantastic. We get rapid growth when it rains here. I bet. Let's see. JBot says I'm looking at getting some cool weather seed into some outdoor shallow containers. Window box type suggestions are welcome. The only, let's see, I think one of my the only window box variety I'm thinking of right now, actually that would be a cool season. I'm gonna save that. I was gonna say a tomato, but you're asking for cool season, so I don't have anything. Maybe somebody else in the chat has some ideas for window box varieties or different types of plants. See, Wickershire Project, hand watering, hand feeding they get by. Shawnee Gross says I should maybe start some basil indoors now. You can. You don't absolutely have to start right now. This is the earliest that I start basil, just because, like I said, if I start earlier than this, then they're just going to be taking up space in my indoor spaces that I need for other plants like cucumbers. Or I still have some spring plants that are ready to come out too. So for me, it's just dialing in that calendar. Food Forest Permaculture says yes. Start basil, so healthy for you. Oh yeah. Okay, since we're on the subject of basil, do any of you have any favorite recipes, or how do you like to use basil? That's what I'm curious to know. And I could share a fun story with you about basil. This was 2 years ago. Our family, so extended family, my in-laws, and then my wife and kids, we took a trip over to Germany. So we kind of did a loop of Germany. Started in Frankfurt, and then we basically trained everywhere. Took a high-speed train up to Bremen, and then Berlin, and then kind of came back to Frankfurt, and then flew home. So why would I say this? Well, my trip home from Germany, and specifically it was in the Netherlands, so Amsterdam to Boston, that flight, I was sitting by a lady who was from Italy, first time to America. So she loved sitting by me because she got to practice English. And then I loved it because this was the first native Italian that I had met that spoke a fluent Italian, of course. But then I got to learn more about the Italian culture from somebody who actually lives in Italy. So we were conversing a little bit before the flight took off, and she was asking me about what I do, and I told her about MEG and my plant nursery and whatnot. And I told her about some of the plants I grow. So I was talking about basil because I know basil is big in Italian culture, also with other European cultures, of course. And I told her one of my customers' favorite recipes is bruschetta. So right there, I unknowingly stuck my foot in my mouth, and it's okay. It's the same thing as if you're speaking English. There's different dialects, different ways of pronouncing the same word. So she started laughing, and I had no idea what she was laughing about. No idea what she laughed about, and she finally told me because after she figured out what I was saying, so I had pronounced it bruschetta. She says it's bruschetta. I'm like, oh. I said thank you for correcting me. I will never make that mistake again. So bruschetta is one of my customers' favorite items to make with basil, and I hope you enjoyed that story of my flight from Amsterdam to Boston with a native speaking Italian. But stories like that are the most fun to share with others, like I'm sharing with you guys today. So let's see. Andy, is there a high demand for all brassicas? Not necessarily. Since we're in cool season plants, I'll tell you what my highest demand plants are. So, as far as the brassica family, broccoli is the favorite, and I don't I'm not exactly sure why that is. So I have clients who are it's their therapy clinics. They work with occupational therapy and speech language pathologists. So in that environment, it's mostly with children. And I think with the broccoli, it's a tactile thing, but also seeing what you would normally buy in the grocery store or the supermarket, but actually seeing what that part that you typically buy at the supermarket looks like when it's actively growing. And that's the craziest part to me too. And I'm curious to know if this is why you got into growing or gardening is that I'll, by and large, and I'm using a broad brush here, by and large, a lot of humans are completely unaware of where the produce that they buy at a supermarket or grocery store comes from. And that's kind of why I do what I do. And that's one of my favorite parts of why I do what I do is for the education element of showing and connecting the dots. So, yeah, you get this broccoli from the grocery store or the supermarket, but let me show you where that plant that what that plant is and where that part that you eat comes from. Oh, and by the way, if you do buy or if you do grow that broccoli plant, the rest of the plant is edible too. So with my CSA customers, that's something I always include in the weekly emails is that once your broccoli, the florets are ready to harvest, don't throw the rest of the plant away because you can totally use the leaves of that plant for other purposes in the kitchen when you're cooking. Not everybody knows that. In fact, a lot of plants are like that. So that's just one aspect of growing or gardening is that you don't get just that prized part that you typically pay for at the grocery store or the supermarket. You get the whole plant and you get the whole experience, which is another reason why I do what I do, is because to me, the journey of a plant's life is one of my favorite parts is of watching that plant grow up and seeing the stages. And honestly, like those ornamental edibles and lots of plants anyways, the beauty of that plant and the experience of watching that plant grow, you're not going to get that if you just go to the grocery store and buy a head of broccoli. You're never going to you have no idea what the growing environment was. You have no idea what that plant looked like. You have no idea how beautiful that plant was when it went through its flowering and fruiting stage. You have no idea. So that's my favorite part of what I do is just connecting the dots for people. Like this is where your food comes from. I can help you get there. I can help you have that experience of having a successful growing experience with this plant so you can actually see where your food comes from. And oh, by the way, it's going to taste 100 times better than anything you ever purchased at the grocery store. So that's the punchline is that, and most of you in the chats that grow food, you already know this, that growing food or harvesting your own grown food, that's the best flavor, the best experience you're going to get for that particular plant just because it's going to be the freshest. And I remember the first time I grew strawberries, this was years ago when my youngest daughter was I think she was 4 or 5. She said the strawberry plant that we grew, so we went and harvested strawberries out in the backyard, and she said, "This is the best tasting strawberry I've had." And I said, "Yeah." Most people don't realize how much they're losing when they purchase store-bought produce just because most of us know this, that most of the stuff at the grocery store, the supermarket, is not bred for flavor. It's bred for shelf life and transportation. So that's that. Okay, so I got off on the tangent with the broccoli. So broccoli's the favorite for the brassica family, and then other cool season plants, sugar snap peas, and that's why I do the different colors of the sugar snap peas just for the variety. But those are definitely one of the favorites, and then carrots. So I think carrots, especially for the therapy clinics, it's kind of like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. that's the, that's the way I look at it. Is you see the tops of the carrot plant, but once you pull it, you get a it's that wow, that payoff of like, hey, we get to pull the actual part that we recognize out of the ground. So sugar snap peas and then carrots are some of my favorite, or my customers' favorite springtime vegetables. Cilantro is also a favorite herb. So it's cilantro season right now. And fun fact, and I'm not ashamed to say this, but it took a college course in herbs, medicinal plants, and then spice class to realize that cilantro that we like to eat as the leafy herb is actually from the coriander plant. And once that matures, flowers and fruits, making that seed, that's the coriander. So I like I said, I'm not ashamed. I had no idea until I took that college class. But that's one of those items I like to connect the dots to. Is oh, this herb is actually this spice that I've been using. I just didn't realize it came from this plant. So cilantro and then parsley too, but cilantro by far is one of the more popular cool season herbs. And of course, cilantro, since it's cool season, that's harder to grow when we get those really high temperature swings in the summer. So I typically I switch off. So I'll do cilantro up until it gets too hot for cilantro to last any point in time. Because you have to remember, with what I do, I'm setting up a plant so I don't have to worry about it. So I want to make sure that plant's going to thrive in its conditions. So from my standpoint, I'm not going to keep on putting cilantro in a customer's garden when I know it's going to probably bolt in the next 2 weeks. So cilantro usually comes out in June, and then that's when basil rolls in, or other summer herbs. Shani Grows asked, how big is your broccoli right now? You'll see, it's not huge. It's still in the vegetative stage, and I brought some broccoli and cabbage up so you can see what those look like in just a little bit. See, Shani, on that subject, we are at seed saving stage on broccoli. Flowered, I have pods and are now waiting. Fantastic. Oh, I lost my spot up here. Okay. Ecology Today says purple cayenne pepper equals showgirl style pretty. Yes, it absolutely does. Shani says there was an onion sale, $5 for a bundle, so 2 bundles are being shipped to me. Hasholio is here. Nice to see ya. See, Wickershire Project says basil we use in tea, in salads. Yep. Stuffed in rice paper, lettuce, pork, chicken, or shrimp. I'm gonna steal that one. I'm glad I asked. This is what I love too, is sharing favorite recipes. But yes, I'm definitely gonna be trying that out. Let's see, Mad Chick Acre says basil olive oil is great to have. Warm up the olive oil to about 130 degrees. Add basil, let sit, and bottle for a few weeks. Nice. I would love some basil soap. That's interesting. I've actually never heard of basil soap. So I just learned something today. You can up your game with the basil grilled cheese or BLT. Nice. I might try that this year too. Okay, it looks like Gross found some dwarf varieties: little gem lettuce, tom thumb lettuce, spinach, parsley, chives, dwarf blue curled kale. I grow that. Yep. Baby bok choy, French breakfast radish. Those are all good. See, Ecology Today says food in stores equals shelf life, transportation, profit. Yep, yep. You guys all have some great information on it, great recipes. Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, so that was last week. And this week, so like I said at the beginning of this, I'm getting better at using the OBS software. So I use hotkeys now. So that's what I learned this week. I started practicing with is hotkeys. So I got my different scenes programmed, and every week I try to learn a new skill with this broadcast software so I can make it look better, more professional, whatnot. Okay, so for this week, I'm gonna be starting the second round, or I'm gonna be starting the second round of sugar snap peas. So I do I I do succession planting, but for me it's a little bit different since these are going out to customers. So it's basically succession start dates for me, so I can get a couple of rounds of plants. And I started doing this years ago for a couple reasons. One is to kind of maneuver around weather patterns. So if we have some freak weather and some plants don't do well one week, it's okay because in a couple weeks we're going to just lost my train of thought. I was reading a comment. So I'm trying to maneuver around weather if I need to, and then just make sure that my customer has a successful growing experience. So this week is second round of sugar snap peas. I'm starting another round of carrots, and then I'm gonna be starting another round of cilantro. This will probably be my last round of cilantro started until we get back into the cooler season at the tail end of the year. I mentioned this a few weeks ago that at the end of this month or possibly in early June, we could be steadily in the 90s, which it's nuts, but it's already happened a couple times last few years. So if the cool season plants like the sugar snap peas, the brassicas, all those get kind of fussy and they don't thrive like we would love to have them thrive in the cooler temperatures, it's okay because here in Minnesota, eventually it's going to get cold again. So I always plan on 2 seasons for cool season or spring plants. So last year I tried something where I did sugar snap peas this time of year, and then in the fall I did shelling peas. It worked really well. I plan on doing that again. I might do sugar snap peas again this fall. I probably will because I was thinking about that last year. But last year, sugar snap peas spring. In the fall, I did the shelling peas. And some pea packets will tell you if you're going to do like a fall sow on when to hit that window. What I would suggest is start earlier than you think. Because what happened the first year I tried this is I ran out of season, so I had less than half of harvestable plants or experience for my customers before it got too cold and we lost too much light for the plant to do its thing. So that's my advice on that is if you are going to do a fall round of cool season plants, start earlier than you think. They usually have on the seed packet, they tell you when your window is to grow and start at the beginning of that, or possibly even a week before, depending on what the weather is going to be doing. So, sugar snap peas, cilantro, like I said, and then prep gardens. So, I have my first gardens that are going to be going out here in just over a week. So this week is going to be the prep. And I think next weekend I'll show you more about what the gardens look like. But from the hardware standpoint, I use grow beds, but they're kind of false grow beds. So they look like grow beds from the outside, but when you get up close, there's no soil. There's kind of a there's a some type of structure. So I got most of them a 2x4 frame, and then I have a tray. So I use a flooded tray method for my grow bags. So what I do this week is I go through all of the hardware, the beds themselves, to make sure there's no damage. They sit in a covered barn, so they're out of the elements during the winter. But I still have to go through, clean everything up, make sure the trays are waterproof. So I have really thick, really thick. It's hydroponic liners, and it's from the same supplier that I get my plastic for my hoop house. So that was kind of cool because I was looking. I'll share this quick story too. So there's been iterations or evolution of my plant growing experience for my customers. So when I first started doing the flooded tray method, actually I'll back up one from that. When I first started doing these instant gardens, I didn't even think about a flooded tray. I used drip irrigation. And if you use drip irrigation, I'd love to hear about how you use that drip irrigation and what type of plants you use for that. If you're using it in the ground in maybe a container or in a raised bed. But I started off with using drip irrigation. So I'd use a half inch line that would run out to where the plants were, and then I'd use quarter-inch lines from the main feed, and then I'd use some type of drip emitters, or sometimes I'd use a ring. It worked. It was a pain because it was so labor intensive. The second year, I already had those customers' systems set up, so I just used those. But I was already thinking of a more efficient way to do this where I could save time, because spending an hour plus per customer on site getting the drip irrigation system set up is it's just a lot of time. I'm like, this isn't gonna scale. So when I start researching with the grow bags, I think I could do a flooded tray method, which is popular for hydroponics already. So I kind of took a page out of the hydroponic playbook. Even though I'm not growing hydroponically, it's sort of a pseudo hydroponic. And what ended up happening is on those first flooded tray methods for the grow bags is I actually took old plywood, wrapped it in 6 mil plastic, and then I actually took 1x2 strips, and then I nailed those to the outside of the plywood, and then wrapped that in plastic. So what that allowed me to do is have about a half an inch standing water in the flooded tray, and then all I had to do is flood the tray. I didn't have to run drip emitters to each grow bags. So that's what I did at the beginning of that when I switched from the drip irrigation into the flooded tray. At those customer sites, I still do have drip emitters, but that's for when the garden outgrows the beds. So a lot of plants, if we have favorable weather, those plants will go longer than they might otherwise. And I don't want to pull the plant out because, like, let's for instance, if we have a cucumber plant that's still actively flowering and fruiting, I don't want to pull that plant out because that's still giving food to that customer. So what I'll do is I'll pull that plant out of the main flooded tray. I'll put it next to the tray, or I can run it wherever the customer would like. And then I have a 3-foot whip with a pick, and then I can just throw the pick in there. And then when the beds get flooded, then the water gets sent to that remote plant, and it gets water too if it needs it. So that's how the next iteration. And then where I'm at now is I'm actually using hydroponic liner. I think it's 20 mil, so it's significantly thicker than the plastic. And I knew the plastic wasn't going to be a long-term solution, only because I had to change the plastic typically every year. So now the hydroponic liner, with how thick it is, that will last for years. It's UV resistant, so that's something I look for too. Is it's going to be outside, and I need something that's going to be UV resistant, so it doesn't degrade during the season. I can use it for multiple years. So this time of the year, when I'm getting a customer garden set up, I just go grab the beds, inspect them to make sure that they're sound, clean them up, and then they're going out to the customers to get set up. I also use water timers for the irrigation systems, just simple. I don't get too fancy. I do have one customer that has a wireless timer. That's theirs. I just hook my water line up to that timer, and then they have it set up so I can test it when I'm on site. And then those ones are nice because then they can compensate for a rain event. So if it is going to rain with city water, you probably know the city water costs more than the country water. The rates anyway. I don't have to pay a water bill because I'm pulling it up out of the ground. But with those types of water timers that are set up for Wi-Fi, you can control when they water, of course. So that's what I'm been doing this week is going through all the hardware to make sure they're all sound, get them cleaned up, and then get ready to go out. Because the week after that, so 2 weeks from now, that's when the first gardens are going to be going in. See, I offered my cilantro shade cloth from Hasholia. What what growing zone are you in? Just out of curiosity. I haven't tried cilantro shade cloth. That might be something I could do in the future. Andy, can you mix an omelet and fold chopped basil in as well? Man, I love these ideas. Keep them coming. I'm gonna try that also. See, ecology today looks up flooded tray grow bags. Yeah, it's a thing. That's also too with what I do is there is information out there. What you'll probably see with a lot of do it yourself or homeowners that use grow beds is they'll use kiddie pools. That's a popular one that I've seen. And I I honestly thought about using kiddie pools, but I've also said in past live streams that I'm cognizant of the aesthetics. And it was 2 years ago when I had a customer that I learned a lesson that I need to pay attention to aesthetics because not everybody's purely functional brained like I am. Some people do care about what their gardens look like. And that was a good point in my history to realize that I need to be aware of this aspect of a customer's journey is they might care deeply about what something like this looks like in their landscape or in their garden. Not just the functional aspect of growing healthy, delicious food, but they want it to look aesthetically pleasing too. So lime is good on everything. Save your lemon for fish dishes. Yep. See, make sure your liner is food safe plastic like HDPE2. Yep, absolutely. Shawnee Gross says the artist people. Yes, yes, the artist people. But like I said, that was good for me because now on my intake forms, that's one of the questions is on a scale of 1 to 10, how important are aesthetics? I do ask that question because it's important to some people. I have some new customers that chuckle at that question, and I have other ones that tell me 8 or 9. So then that immediately tells me where I need to be thinking about when I'm setting those gardens up is they either do care about the aesthetics or not so much. But even if they say like I don't I don't care about the aesthetics so much, I'm still gonna do something to make it look aesthetically pleasing. So, yep. Ecology today says I'm about 90% practical with a smidgen of art, craft in my gardening. Yeah, yeah, it's good. I'm always constantly trying to learn. I know a lot of you are too, so that's how I look at it is if I have an experience where I'm confronting something that I didn't think about, that somebody else does care about, I just come up at it from the point of view of what can I learn from this to make what I'm doing better for the people that I'm trying to serve. So with that, let me make sure my camera's still doing its thing. Oh yeah. So this is the plant show part of this show, which I love. So this should switch to my other phone. Looks like that's all working. So okay. So this first part down here that we're looking at is it's called red deer tongue. And those are in those little seedling bags. So I think I showed the seedling bags here a few weeks ago when I was still inside. And the cool thing about those seedling bags, and the reason why these are even in seedling bags, is because for the month of May, one of my customers or some of my customers, I'm going to be helping them transplant into their gardens. So I'm going to take this out right here so I can show up close. But so some of my customers, these are my retirement homes, senior living, assisted living, memory care. I'm going to be helping them with set their raised beds. So this is a little bit out of my normal wheelhouse with the grow bags. So these are in here because I'm going to let these size up here, and in a few weeks, once we start to set up their in ground, or a lot of them have raised planter beds, so they're accessible by wheelchairs. These are going to be going into those beds. So this is something brand new, and this is a new business niche that I have for my already niche business. So this might work great, it might work horrible, but we're going to find out here. But each one of these is a single plant called red deer tongue, and these are cool plants. If you haven't grown red deer tongue, these leaves will get darker red, so they're already pretty dark already. But it's called red deer tongue. Google that. It's a very cool plant. And then this guy right here is one of my sales assets. This is what I take on my sales calls. So for the past couple of weeks at these retirement homes, I've been taking this guy out with me. And if you recognize this plant, this strawberry plant, I've had in a lot of live streams. So this one I had to wake up about 3.5 months ago to get to this point, and it is producing like crazy. So I've been pushing this plant really hard, but I've also been having a lot of my clients at the assisted living and memory care help me hand pollinate these. That's the actual activity I do with them. And some of these, when I first brought this strawberry plant out of hibernation, I intentionally hand pollinated a couple of fruits on these, and then other ones I didn't hand pollinate. And at the time when I'd have a strawberry that looked like this, and then one that was misshapen, I would incorporate that into the storytelling or the experience of, this is what the bees are doing for us, where we have a fruit like this, and this is why we need pollinators so we don't have misshapen fruits there. So this is called All-Star. That's the variety. It's a June bearing, and it's just now the first week of May, and it already has fruits like this. But like I said, this has been growing indoors, and I had to wake this up a few months ago to get this point. So if your strawberry plant doesn't look like this right now, it's okay. This is not normal, but this is because I've been growing indoors. So All-Star, red deer. Now we're going to go over to my other plants. So this is the honey snap peas. This is what they look like. And the word of today is tendril. So like I said last week, I got the old fence set up in these grow bags. And the word of today is tendril, because you can see what's happening here. This tendril on this plant right here is already starting to latch onto this garden fence. And this is one of my favorite parts of this too, is once these plants start growing to the point where their tendrils come out, they're going to latch onto whatever they can for stability. And I try to get the fence into the grow bag at this point, because they're still small enough to where if they start growing weird, I can kind of just gently say, hey buddy, we're going to put you through here, kind of route them the way they want. These ones I typically let them grow a little bit longer, and at some point they're going to come up here and grab on to this fence. And these honey snaps, the royal snaps, and the sugar anns, You can see this is probably about a foot and a half above the soil level. They're only gonna poke up about maybe here, so they're not gonna get crazy out of control. They work really well for the 7-gallon grow bags, and I'm gonna definitely give updates on this plant because this is one of the exciting plants to watch as it grows through its vegetative, flowering, and then fruiting stage. And these are older fences. I used these last year, so you can see like right here, these are the old tendrils from last year. So that's a honey snap, sugar snap pea. Let me come over here. I dropped my mic. So I grabbed a handful of bags out of the hoop house this morning. This is calendula. So a 3-gallon grow bag called Orange Flash Calendula. This is what it looks like after it's been outside for a couple weeks, so that's okay. They're all small. They're gonna get large very quickly here in the next couple of weeks. So that's calendula. This is Empress of India nasturtiums. That's what that looks like. And if you can hear some shots in the background, we're out in the country, so I'm used to hearing gunshots, people doing target practicing, but this is a nasturtium. This is one of my #1 performers in grow bags. This plant is going to be a mounding edible flower. The leaves and the flowers on this are edible, of course, and it does very well. The difference between this plant and this plant is that, as I mentioned last week, this plant is a spring flower calendula. When we get to July, when it gets really hot, it's going to slow down. If it does flower, the flowers are going to be a lot smaller, and then eventually it's just going to go to seed and it's going to be done. But this right here, the nasturtiums, they'll go all summer long as you consistently harvest the flowers. So if it goes to seed, it's going to slow down. What I found with the nasturtiums too, as well as the violas and pansies, here in Minnesota, I can get those to go all season long too, as long as the flowers are continuously harvested. If it gets away, if a customer of mine goes on vacation and comes back and it's slowed down because it produced seed, I'll deadhead the plant and then we'll have another round of flowering. So calendula, nasturtium, this is my pixie cabbage. So pixie cabbage, this is going to be a head cabbage when it's done, but this is what this looks like. Also, these are all 3-gallon grow bags, so I'll zoom out. 3 gallons. You can see the difference between the 7-gallon over there, the sugar snap pea, and the 3-gallon. So all 3 gallons. Pixie cabbage. And then Shawnee was asking me about my broccoli. This is what my broccoli, this is bravado broccoli. This is what the broccoli looks like so far. So it's still a small guy. That's okay. 3-gallon bag also. So all the brassicas all go in 3-gallon grow bags. So this really, if you look at this isn't a ton of soil, and I compensate with that with higher nitrogen content fertilizer. So they do well, and I like having them in the 3-gallon grow bags just because they're easy to move. So they're small, the seedling stage right now, but once they get the full canopy, the main stems up, and they're starting to put florets on, they're going to be a lot larger, up to about here, but they're still going to be easy to move around. So that is that. And that strawberry that's ripe up there on the All-Star, I'm gonna have to eat that today. That's gonna have to be consumed. All right, so that's it for the plants today. Shawnee says never done grow bags before. I usually use a container I found. Yeah, that's one way to do it. Appreciate the plant show. Yeah, you're welcome. That's something I'm maybe doing every weekend, is just showing the progress on these plants. And yes, somebody's still shooting over there off screen. Oh well. So anyway, that's the update for the spring plants. We're still in the seedling stage, so even though it seems, and this is true if you're growing in ground or in a raised bed or a different type of container, like maybe a terracotta, is that even though it looks like those plants aren't growing very fast, I guarantee there's a lot going on under the soil. As we get to the rapid growth stage of that plant's life, it's going to seem like it's growing, visibly growing every day. It very likely is. So I'll briefly touch on this as you're going forward. There's different ways to manipulate growing, and this is more advanced growing techniques, but something you can think about. So if you think about growing plants as like maybe an automobile engine, I went to school to be an automotive technician. So when you talk about internal combustion engine, you talk about different things the internal combustion needs to operate. You need fuel, you need oxygen, you need an ignition source. For plants, you need a few things. You need water, you need sunlight for photosynthesis, you need temperature, and that's why I keep on hammering on the temperature thresholds, because that's super important in growing. And then you also need the nutrients, which kind of goes in with the water too. But any of those inputs you can manipulate to speed up or slow down your growth. So what I'm saying is, if you have a greenhouse or a hoop house, you don't necessarily even need to have something like that. You can use domes outside. And this is actually, I think in future live streams I might talk about this more too, because I like to read historical books of how other through different times and periods of time, how different growers manipulate their growing environment. And I have seen some YouTube videos on using like plastic jugs to help warm up plants when they're in the ground. But that's an example of what you could do to manipulate the growing environment for raising temperature. So lights or sunlight, you can't really manipulate the sun, but you can adapt your plants, or you can move the location of your plants in relationship to the sun. So I saw one comment on there about using shade cloth. That's definitely a move for reducing the sunlight intensity on your plants. If you wanted to increase the sunlight on a certain plant, you can move the plant, which is super easy in a container or grow bag. It's a little harder when you're in the ground, but that is something that you can think about when you actually growing in the ground. Of is where the sunlight, is this a sun-loving plant, or you get what I'm saying. And then water and nutrition. What I loved about the flooded beds for the grow beds or grow bags is that I've basically maxed out the water that those plants are going to get for the grow bags. So that is a variety that or aspect of growing that I use for my method. Is I max out the water. I don't have to worry about that. The plant's going to get the water it needs. All right, I'm going to read a couple of these last comments, and then I'm going to sign off for the day. So when do the customers get their tray of containers? So I think you might be asking about the lettuce. Well, I'm going to say there's two different ways, because there's two different things going on. The actual gardens, those are going to be coming out here in 2 weeks. So this week, like I said, I'm going to be prepping everything. And then in 2 weeks, that's when the first gardens are going out. And then for my senior communities, that's actually starting this week. So it won't be this tray of red leaf. I got other ones that are further along than that, but that starts this week. So I have a demo tomorrow, and then Wednesday is my first actual. We're getting a raised bed going for a couple of my customers. So if that answers your question, this week it's starting, and that's all cool season plants that are going into their raised planter beds and then in ground, and then we have some containers too that we're getting transplanted. But for those, that's less work for me as far as what I'm doing. And this is the new. I'll briefly touch on this. This is the new customer, a new niche inside of my niche business. I'm gonna pause real quick because I got a big tractor that's going by. It's planting season here in Minnesota. Okay, so all the monocrop corn and soybeans are going in right now. So that's what I'm gonna hear for the rest of the day. Anyway, so I have a new niche business within my niche business already, and the new niche business is working with assisted living and senior communities. So for those, I'm actually showing up with plants. I'm doing an hour-long program where it's going to be some education, some light humor. A lot of it is for these communities. I'm pulling their stories because a lot of these are like avid former gardeners. So I love hearing the stories from some of these communities because stuff that I've never thought about. And this loops back into what I'm saying, like the history. So history of garden, like if I'm talking to uh, like a 80-year-old resident that's in assisted living that gardened for 5 decades, the amount of knowledge they have is just incredible. So that's the coolest part is like just reminiscing about what gardening was like 50 years ago or whatnot, and then kind of relating that to are there things that they did that we can use today, or just hearing all those stories. It's a very cool experience. But basically for those, what I'm doing is I'm bringing my seedlings and then we're getting their gardens established. Ecology Today says ASMR fieldwork. Yes, that's what it sounds like, right? ASMR fieldwork. uh, yeah, but anyway, thank you very much for joining me today with the live stream, and look forward to growing with you more this summer. So take care, everybody.